Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Bava Batra daf Yud Tes. We're going to begin on Yud Tes Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. So our Mishnah in the second parak began by telling us that a person needs to distance themselves, and whether it's digging a pit next to your friend's pit, and the idea is that you could potentially be causing danger to your neighbor's property. So in this, the Mishnah also told us V'lo nivreches hakayvsin b'chulu, that a person is also not allowed to have a launderer's pool unless it's distance from the kosel chavero 3 tfachim. It has to be 3 tfachim away from your friend's property. So on this, Omer Rab Nachman, Omer Rabba Baravua Lo Shanu, the only time we say that 3 tvachim is enough is Ella only min ha-mechamtson. Says Rashi, what is that? Nivrecha shesharin boyes ha-begadim yom yomayim. You soak the garments 1 or 2 days, but sayas klavim with the waist of a dog ad shemachmitzin umasrichin, until it becomes putrid and smelly. Min ha-nadian dalad amas. However, when it comes to the other processes, Rashi, shemayim nitazin, that where splashing of water could occur, so there you have to distance yourself 4 amos. So basically there's 2 types of pools. One is for soaking, and the other which you scrub. And while you're scrubbing, that could cause splashing. And therefore, because of the splashing, you need to be distanced even further. You need to be distanced 4 amos. Tanyam hachi. Furthermore, similar to this, we learned, Nivreches HaKayvsin, when it comes to this launderer dalad amos. Ayban and Tanan Gimel Tvachim. Elav Shemam and Rab Nachman. Yikad Derami Lamir. Some actually as a stira. Tanan Nivreches HaKayvsin. Our Mishnah says regarding the launderer is only Gimel Tvachim. Asani Rab Amos. We learn elsewhere it's 4 amos distance from the wall. So Rab Nachman Omer Rabba Baravua Ukasha. Kan min ha-mechamson, one is from the soaking. Kan min ha-nadian, one is from the scrubbing, which you need more distance. Rav Chia Berei de Rav Avi Masti Lo Behedi, he learned it explicitly. Im kain hirchik misfas mechamson lo kaisel gimel tvachim. He actually throws in the word so that there's no confusion that it's specifically talking because of soaking. Okay, v'tzad b'sid. Now, this is the next part of the Mishnah in which it tells us not only do you have to distance yourself 3 tfachim, it says v'tzad b'sid. There's no question. It says, and you also must put lime or some type of some agent which will help prevent the liquid from spreading. Now, iboyhu b'tzad b'sid tanan odema otzad b'sid tanan. Is it one or the other? And therefore, here tzad b'tzid, even if it's within gimel tfachim, it's okay. So pshita tzad b'tzid tanan. It's actually telling you that you need to do both. You can choose im kain or vinhu plus ninhu. Then you should basically include them both together. So the fact is, says Rashi, tzad b'tzid tanan. Latarti Babi Reisha Matsiyasa, because it mentions the V'tzad a second time. But the second time, when it says all these things, you're supposed to distance Gefes, Zevel, Melach, Sid, Sloyim, all these different things from a wall, 3 tvachim, and then it says Tzad b'tzid. So the question is, if it's 3 tvachim, and it must be and, because the Seifa is talking about or. Because if the resh is also, you could do either one, so then why is it 2 separate statements? It should all be included together. Even though the truth is, maybe they're both requiring that you should be tzad b'tzid together with being marchik gimel tfachim, but because there are different types of damages, it's coupled in different places. Reisha, hazeka, what is the hazeka is demasuna, is because of the moisture of the launderer. Seifal, the other case was hazeka that havas, because of the excessive heat. So it's not a right. Tashma. Rabbi Huda Eimer Sel Haba Biyadayim, when it comes to this rock, which comes from very soft ground. So Zechayfer Miboida Bekan Zechayfer Miboida Bekan. Zeh Marcha Gimel Tvachim. vitzad b'tzid, v'zer marchik gimels vitzad b'tzid. Now it mentions specifically when it comes to this type of earth, because it's a soft ground, that you need to do both. You have to be distancing yourself 3 tefachim and tzad b'tzid, which is mashma, we can make a diak. Taima, the will be a dime low. If it's not soft, then maybe not. So therefore, again, maybe this is a raya that you don't need both. Now, hodin the afal gav delay babi a dime namitza b'tzid, you still need 2. So babi a dime it's richle. We still need this as a chiddush. Sakadei limit kivanda babi a dime we won't rabba chatfei kamash one. We said this also in yesterday's daf that because it's soft, so because of that, you would maybe think 3 tefachim is not enough. Like we just saw, it's possible you need 4 almos by other things. So the chiddush is that gimel tefachim works also. That's enough of a distance, even though it's babi a dime. However, it's not a raya either way. Okay. Let's look at question 11. Lo yachbar bar b'lo yishtiach leim kim hirchik marchikos agevzos zevel mikoiso shakavero. Him sarich gam l'tzoid b'tzid odai b'harchaka bilvad. So the reisha is an avoidal ifshata. That we don't know. But the seif, as we just mentioned, is oy marchik otza. You can do either one. So that's what we ended up saying. The seif is clear; it's either one, even though there's some girsas in the Mishnah, but it's clear. We're saying that the seifa is you could either be marchik gimel tefachim or bitzad b'tzid. However, the whole shaila is in the ratio whether you need to do both. Okay. As we mentioned in the Mishnah, that marchikin esagev zevel, nesa melech, nesa salayim v'chulu. So all these things produce excessive heat, and therefore we don't want them too close to that of your neighbor because it's going to cause a hezek. So Tanan Hasam, we learned over there, b'met taimnin, which is also the beginning of a parak in Masechta Shabbos, the din of hatmana. Now there's 2 elements of hatmana. One is being moisav hevel, that you're actually adding heat, and that we say it's also even miboid yoim before Shabbos. And then there's one which is an enomois of hevel, in which then on Shabbos it's not allowed, but on Erev Shabbos it's allowed. And obviously these are specific, strict, difficult dinim, which again are elaborated more in that Masechta. But the Mishnah over there says ma tainim ein taimin. So it says ein taimin. And it mentions almost the exact same thing as our Mishnah, which our Mishnah mentions these are things that produce heat, but there's going to be a small discrepancy. So all that we said, but then it throws in here whether it's dry or moist. So why does our Mishnah mention rocks, which also could get hot? What it should be consistent. So Rav Yosef, doesn't mention anything about hatmana over the Masechta Shabbos because a person doesn't do hatmana with rocks. So you think it's also the normal way for a person to do hatmana with unfinished wools or with tongues of purple, this wool which is sheared? But the sanya, with tzipit semer l'shayne shel argaman, with a moichin and with cotton being metaltal noisan. But it says you cannot be metaltal. So let's look at Rashi. These are all examples as hachamin b'shabbos omer rabbanon also hatmin b'davar hamoisav hevel. You cannot do hatmana with something which is moisav hevel, which will add heat. B'hasam afrish time exer shemayatmin b'remetz. Because the problem is you may end up doing hatmana b'remetz with these coals, and that's also to do. Okay, so these cases are mentioned even though it's not the normal way, but it still mentions it, but it says you can't move them. It says Rashi, Shin muksin moleches begodim. This is still considered to be muksa. There's a kasha. So why again does it not mention all the cases? So El Merbaya, Yagid Elavarei, who let one speak for its friend. You're right, they both could be mentioned. It's not a problem. We just didn't mention every case, but the truth is, it's the same thing. So, if it's true that one is helping the other friend by explaining the other, so mention the whole long list in one of the cases, one of the Mishnayos. Be'idach v'huadin le'idach. And then the other Mishnah only needs to mention one, and then you would understand, oh, this is one from this long list of 10, so that it includes all 10. So it wouldn't mention everything except one. That doesn't make sense. So Elo Marava Hasam had a time of the lake Katani Salayim. The reason why it's to mention rocks by Hatmana is Mishum Demishadche La Ukadera. Because the reality is, even though they're rocks, they could get hot, they don't use this for Hatmana at all, because it will break the pot. It will ruin the pot. So no one will ever use rocks for Hatmana, so that's why it's not mentioned. The reason why in our mission doesn't mention sand, Mishum that sand, says Rashi, if you already have something which is warm already, so sand will warm it up. So when it comes to Hatmana, it is Moisav Hevel. A wall in general is cold, and therefore, if it's something which is cold, it will keep it or make it even colder. So sand isn't necessarily something which always makes things hot. What it does, it just overdoes whatever the temperature is. So if it's hot, it gets hotter. If it's cold, it gets colder. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, I have Hatani Rabbi Yoshi, but the problem is, Rabbi Yoshi does mention sand. Over there, it's talking about moist sand. So Tana Didan Nami Lisni mentioned moist sand. Musna again. So Atani Amasamayim, he already mentioned Amasamayim. So Atu what? Milu Katani Amasamayim, Katani Nivrechas Akaimsin. So these are things which are pretty similar to one another, and yet they're both mentioned. So Hanu Tzrichi. No. When it comes to the launderer and the Amasamayim, this water well, they both are needed. Ti'itana Amasamayim Mishum de Kavia, because that's something which is more kaiveya, it's something which is more set. Avol Nivrechas Akaimsin, which is more the way kavia, this is not, it's more of a temporary thing. Amalo. You would think that it's not an issue. It's a big deal, so you have it. Why do you have to distance yourself? It's not a permanent thing. You still need to. Because the water is not moving. However, when Amasamayim is flowing water, so flowing water may not be as dangerous or problematic. No, that's why they're both mentioned. So that it is necessary to be mentioned, but not the other. So Marchikin says So our Mishnah, again, mentions other things you have to distance yourself from your friend. So you have to distance your seeds or your plowing and urine from a wall 3 tefachim. So the question is, Zrayim, Tebeli Misham Macharesha. Understand, if you're going to be planting, so we already mentioned plowing. So Marin's Mefoil Siyad. Maybe we're talking about the case of Mefoil Siyad. Says Rashi, Shestam Charshin Seifel Nizro V'Hakatan Izroyim. At the end of plowing, Stam Charshin, typical plowing, Seifel Nizro is so that you'll plant. V'Hakatan Izroyim. We already mentioned planting, so why do you have to mention it? It's Mefoyos Yad, where you planted by hand, which is not as detrimental. Therefore, you have to mention Charisha. So Macharesha Tebelo Mishim Izroyim. How the other way around? So why do you need that? So Chayrish Li'Lonis. You plowed for trees. Says Rashi, Shesham Ilonis, there are trees miyamim rabim for a long time. Uval lachrosh tachtehim lashbichan, and you're just plowing around them to make them better. In other words, you're never going to plant at all. So therefore, it's not a problem because the whole issue is charisha but not zuriya. But typically mishum maya. There's also an issue, says Rashi, shesarch lashkois and tamid. You have to water it constantly. Kivan di eshel lizrayim below mayim. So why is it? Obviously, you need water in order for things to grow. So Tana be'eretz Yisrael koi dechsiv limtar hashamayim tish demayim, that it's from the heavens, which basically means it does not require your own watering. Okay, so that's what that means. So Lememra, is that coming to tell you the Zrayim, when it comes to planting, as we continue to Yud Testament Bays, so true when we're talking about planting with Stadim Koi, that you basically go sideways, and the land weakens the foundation of the wall, right? Mutstadim kamishar shrei. You're telling me that that's what happens with these roots? They end up going sideways, and that's the reason why the promise is going to mess up the wall. But Tanan hamavrich as a geffen. So someone who bends down into the ground, these grapevines, geffen yechidi, Rashi says, be'aretz im ein al gaba offer shosh tefachim. It does not have 3 tefachim. Lo yavi zera leha. Don't plant other seeds by it. But Tanya law of zareas atzdadin eloch ve'eloch. You could plant on the sides, so clearly the roots don't go on the sides. So Rav Chaga b'shem Rav Yosim imnei shemechalidin as a karku malin offer tichoyach. So what ends up happening is it ends up weakening the earth and ends up bringing up softness into the earth. So since the earth below is getting soft, it makes the earth next to it soft as well. So therefore, that is the issue over here. Okay, let's look at question 12 and then TB4. Question 12. Marchikan says Zroyim. So Zroyim telling me Misham Charisha. So he said, why does it mention Zroyim? Just learn out straight from Charisha. Charisha, that's it. So he said that's Mefoyos Yad, where you end up planting by hand, which is not a significant amount of seeding. So Macharisha typically Misham Zroyim. So if the prohibition is if there's a prohibition of plowing, but obviously you're planting too. So he said, no, maybe you're plowing for trees. So therefore there's no planting here. You always need water. So it's in Eretz Yisrael, the pasuk says, L'matar shemaim tishtamayim. Okay, let's see if I wrote hopefully the same thing over here. TB4. Sadish she'enu asui lahachrish mefolos yad v'sadi lanais v'sadi shalot tzarech lahashkais. Okay, basically threw all the answers right into one. Okay, great. So let's continue. All right, so we're on New Testament days. Says the next part of the mission of Esamei Gulayim and a kaising mutfachim b'chulu. So you have the distance from urine 3 tefachim from a wall. So you can actually urinate onto your friend's wall or on the side near the wall. The pasuk says, it says so many times in Nach mashten bekir. It's an interesting language. That achav will be wiped out mashten bekir, just like a person who urinates onto a wall. It says Rashi al derech when the adam came. Obviously, that's what people did because that's an expression. V'otzer v'ozu b'Yisrael, and they will all be scared away. Fine. So I thought you're not allowed to urinate anywhere near a wall. So how can we say mashmik here? When it's over there in the psukim, there's something about pouring out urine. That is a totally different level. So it's using an avet mole v'shayvchay sham. If you take a urinal and you just pour a bucket of urine, that's where it's problematic. That has to be gimel tvachim. But an individual can urinate on the wall. Tashma lo yishmach adam mayim b'tzad kaisel shel chavero el im kin hirchem men gimel tvachim hasam nam b'shayvchin. And it mentions water. Tashma lo yashtin adam mayim b'tzad kaisel shel chavero. The person is not allowed lo yashtin adam even while they're urinating. It doesn't mean water, by the way. It means a little urine. It's a little yashtin. Mayim, but sad kaisel shel chaveros, when they can't urinate by the side. So it says beferish that you not just shayvchen to be medavar, but kaisel aveinim. It's only when we're talking about brick walls, because brick wall by urinating there is going to cause it to get soft. It says Rashi, she yivashu b'cham, it gets hot, dried up by the heat. The ham nimoikim machmas amayim, and ends up getting again soft and weakened because of the liquid. If it's stone, as long as it's not enough to damage, which is a tefach. So you just all you need to be is a tefach away. If you have one large stone, mutter. Which, again, maybe you can answer, that's just mash makir, is when you're dealing with one large stone, where there's no issue of you urinating on that stone. Tiyufta the Rabbi Merchana tiyufta. Fine, so taka kasha. I have a Rabbi Merchana krakaimer. He brought a pasuk of mash makir. No hasam hachkamer. Now feel me did darachili shtune makir, even something which a person is unusual that they do this onto a wall, there will be nothing remaining of you. My nihu kalba. What is that which does this? A dog. Amrav tuvi bar kisna amr shmuel rokik ein mamayit b'chaloin. So when it comes to a rokik, which is a thin wafer or a cracker, it will not be mamayit a window. What is that talking about? Cracker next to a window, says Rashi. Should be in bias between one house and the other. You have a window. And there's an opening of a tefach. And there's a mace in one of these cracks. But tuma boikas outside sheni. And the tuma therefore should go into the second bias. Ein rokik mamayit shirun. So if it's less than a tefach, then the tuma will not travel. So maybe if you put a thin wafer, cracker, that will be mamayit the chaloin, so that it will not transfer tuma. No, that doesn't help. So in order for it to be mavatal, or to make the window, so it's less than a tefach, and therefore the tumah won't travel, it has to be you put something which is not a food item, and something which is not mavatal. But food, you're gonna maybe want to eat, so it's not bittul to the window. So my area rokik, why do we mention this thin wafer cracker? Feel of a nami, even if it's, I guess, pretty thick, a feel of a nami light. So loma boy cover. Loma boy ava. There's no question about a thick one. Kivan di chazile, because since it's fit for consumption, because it's big. Loma vatale. Of a rokik demeis, because it got disgusting because it's so tiny. It doesn't really have. It's really not edible so much anymore. Ema batuli mavatale kamash moa. So that's the whole chiddush. Is certainly a thick one is a problem, but even a thin one. But typically, dehavli davar shu mekabel tuma. Why don't you just mention because it's an issue of tumah, because it's a food, and that's the reason why it doesn't work. The answer is shenilash b'mei, that you kneaded it with fruit juice, and that's not machshir kabel tumah. It has to be something like water. Yad shachadam. Meisvei kupa malei teven. Okay, let's slow down. Let's look at question TA3. TA3. So he says like this: if you have a rakik, ena mamad b'chalon, ma'adua ena mamayit, why not? So we said Rashi, my kamashmon, typically the davar makabel tuma enu chaytzeitz. So it's kivan de roy lachil mavatal le hasam, ve'ari benilish memei paris ena makabel tuma. So that's what we just saw, which is again TA3, which is the reason why a rakik is not memayit a chaloin. Fine. And again, typically dahavile davar shehu typically davar shehu mekabel tuma, v'chol davar shehu mekabel tuma, enu chaytzes ne tuma, shenilish b'mei peros. So that's the answer there. Okay. All right. Weiter. So basically, kupa malei teven. Let's say you have this room which is filled with straw. V'chavius malea groigris. You have a barrel filled with these pressed figs. Hamamunachem b'chaloin. You put them into a wall. Now these food stuffs have a container. Now Rowan, we evaluate. Kol she'il yinatal v'yachalon teven v'groigris alamoid memni atzman chaytetzin. If you would remove those containers, that the food would still be able to be there, then it's considered to be a chatzitza. Says Rashi, so then it would be a chatzitza. You understand? Straw is something which is fit for animal consumption, and therefore, if that's the case, so then of course it should be makabel toma, and it should not be chatzitz even without its container. The answer is Besaria. Says Rashi, nirkav. We're dealing with it's rotten straw. So chazi with tina, so can't give it to your animal, but you can use it as cement. Therefore it's not bottle. No, it needs to be kaitzi. It has thorns, and therefore because of that you can't use it for cement. So okay, but chazil hasaka, maybe it can be used for fire. So b'masun, that's wet. So chazil has a gadol, make a big fire, and even if it's a little bit moist, it can still use it. No, hesed gadol or shliach. A big hesed gadol is not something with shliach, so therefore it's not a problem. Groigris, how about these foods, these dried figs? It's food. So why would it work if the kli wasn't there? So Mishmul, we're talking in a case b'shehis rifu. V'chein tana Rabbi baravua b'shehis rifu. Says Rashi, hitliu. It became exceedingly wormy, and therefore for that reason it's no longer fit. Okay. So hay chavis hechidami. What is this example of a barrel that we said that if you have the situation where a chavis, which is malay grigris, so what exactly is this barrel? If the opening of the keg is on the outside, says Rashi Litzad Habayis, toward the house, shein hameis b'soicho. So the opening is facing the area where there's no mace, and the whole question is the second room have this tumah, and the opening is facing outward as we continue to chaf. So he gufa techutz. The barrel itself should be the chatzitza. So it shouldn't be a problem because the whole barrel is completely closed on the side of the mace. The hakli cheres in a matama begabo, because it's not going to be matama from the outside. So el with the pumul agav. One answer is that the opening is actually facing the area of where the mace is, and since the opening of the chavis is facing the area of the mace, so therefore the barrel doesn't work because the barrel is going to be problematic. The pumul avar relates on the outside. So if we're dealing with a chavis shel cheres, it cannot be matami from the outside. However, a barrel which is made out of mateches, of metal, that taki can become tummy on the outside as well, and therefore the barrel will not prevent the from the tumah from going to the next room. Okay, question 13. Chavis shel cheres imam metas b'chalon. This barrel shall tetzi tuma mebayas bias. So it depends. If it's on the outside, if it's facing the mace, it's not mamayit, and therefore it's a matama. On the inside, if it's facing the outside rather, that is mamayit. However, v'hushia mois v'nokuv shalotehi daitalif noiso. So this, we didn't really see this last piece, but it's got to be something in which is not fit to be completely used. We'll finish that piece afterwards. But this is what I wrote on question TB5. Im ha-pesach, the opening shel ha-chavias b'chutz, az ma-metas b'chalon. Avol im hi b'fnim, az yesh tuma b'fnim ha-chavias ve'enu mevatelas. Adkan.